Hello, and welcome to the Night Sky Reader. I'm here with a story to help you relax, meditate, or gently drift to sleep. Tonight, Ajrakh block printing at dusk. Settle in, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's begin. The block comes down in blue-gold light and meets the cloth with a soft wooden thump. Ismail holds it there for a breath, not long, only long enough for the pressure to settle evenly through cotton and paste. Then he lifts it straight up. The small teak block leaves behind a star flower, sharp at the points, exact inside the older geometry already laid down over days of washing, drying, printing, and dyeing. Red from an earlier stage sits quiet beside black. Pale spaces wait where color has been kept back. The cloth is nearly finished for now, though not finished. Ajrakh never asks for that kind of hurry. He shifts his left palm over the length stretched on the padded table and smooths a faint ripple flat. The table gives a little under his hand. The top cloth has the slight tack that helps everything stay where it should. Beside him, other blocks rest upside down in a line, their carved faces hidden, their handles dark with use. A rag lies folded near the tray. On the stone floor, the day's heat has not completely left. He glances toward the courtyard opening where the light has begun to thin. Evening in Kutch always arrives in layers. First, the brightness lifts off the walls. Then the air loosens. Then cloth starts to feel different under the palm. There is enough time, he thinks, or nearly enough. He does not say this aloud. He rarely needs to speak at the table. But the thought is there, a small tally running under the steadiness of his hands. This much length left, this much light, the air cooling by degrees. One stage more to carry cleanly through before night takes the warmth out of the cloth and asks for another kind of patience. He brings the star block to the tray, presses it into the prepared surface, checks the coverage with a glance, and returns it to the fabric. Thump. Lift. Thump. Lift. The sound is not loud. It lives close to the wood and the cotton. Still, in the workshop, it sets the measure for everything else. The length before him is narrow enough to read in one sweep of the eye, and long enough that the pattern has its own weather. He works from one registered mark to the next, following what earlier blocks have already established. Each new impression must sit where it belongs, neither drifting into the black line work, nor crowding the red forms that will hold their place through later rinses. The star flower is small. That makes it forgiving to look at from a distance and unforgiving to place. Yusuf stands at the far side of the table, younger, quiet, his eyes on the cloth's edge rather than on Ismail's face. When Ismail reaches the end of an arm's span, Yusuf eases the length forward a few inches, then stills it again. No wasted motion, no chatter. The whole exchange is in timing. "A little more," Ismail says once. Yusuf draws the cloth. There. The padded surface takes the shift. Ismail smooths again with both palms, feeling for slack, for hidden damp, for any place where the fabric might rise and make a false edge. His fingers know the worn corners of this particular block. One side fits more securely into the web between thumb and forefinger. The teak has darkened over years of indigo and washing and handling. The finger holds are polished by skin. He lowers the block, presses, lifts, shifts by the width of a motif, presses again. The pattern advances almost without seeming to move, the way evening itself does when no one is looking directly at it. What was open cloth becomes marked cloth. What was only the memory of a geometry becomes visible again, one measured landing at a time. The cloth seems to accept each impression with a muted firmness, then release it. Wood to cloth, hand to handle, eye to line. A practiced pressure, a pause just long enough. The next place, the next. Now and then he checks the tray, adding a little more from the prepared paste so the surface stays even. The smell near it is damp and earthy. with something mineral underneath. From another part of the workspace comes the faint smell of rinsed cotton drying from earlier work. Indigo lives in the air too, quiet but distinct, a coolness you can almost taste. He notices the light changing most clearly in the blues. What was simply dark before now begins to deepen. The indigo on finished pieces hanging farther in the room takes on more weight as the gold drains from the edges of things. The red stays warm a little longer. He goes on. Thump. Lift. His breathing finds the same interval as his hands. At first he is still counting without meaning to. So many motifs to the next border. So many repeats to the end of the visible section. If he gains a little here, if he shortens the pause there, the cloth will be ready to move while the air is still cooperative. But he knows this temptation well. Speed hides inside familiarity. The pattern is known, and because it is known, it invites carelessness dressed as confidence. One small drift in registration will not announce itself politely. It will carry forward through the whole length, so he keeps the block honest, bringing it down square, lifting it clean, letting the already printed lines tell him where he is. Yusuf, who never needs to be asked, steadies the table when Ismail leans farther across. A faint scrape of wood on cloth. The rag turns in Ismail's hand. As he wipes one edge of the block, he presses again. Outside, a bird calls once from somewhere near the lane. Inside, the workshop is quieter than it was an hour before. Fewer footsteps cross the stone. A basin rings softly as someone sets it down. Water sounds carry more easily in evening. When he reaches for the next section, he feels the change before he names it. The cloth edge under his palm is not wet, not even truly damp, but it holds a trace of coolness the earlier length did not. The air has begun to settle differently. He stops. Not for long. Long enough. He lays the block aside and passes his hand over the cotton once more, this time slower. The fabric has taken on that evening softness that can either help or mislead, depending on how a person answers it. He studies the last impression. Its points are clean. The line sits where it should. Still, he leans closer and touches the table covering with his fingertips, testing how much give it has, how much moisture the room is quietly carrying now. Yusuf waits without asking anything. Ismail resets the cloth by a breadth of an inch, smooths from center outward, presses the heel of his hand along the borderline to make sure nothing has lifted. The wish to hurry passes through him, plain enough to notice. The light is dropping. The next stage still waits. If he pushes now, perhaps the whole evening will feel less narrow. But the cloth is cooler. That is the fact in front of him. The answer cannot be speed. He picks up the block and makes one test impression at the margin where the next repeat will hide any small correction. He presses a touch more gently, letting contact do the work instead of force. When he lifts, the shape holds clear. That is enough. He continues with a different pace, not slower in any dramatic way, only less tight. The pause after each landing grows almost invisible but real. He lets the block rest on the cloth for the fraction of a breath the new air requires. Outside, evening gathers itself. Inside, the room settles around that new measure, as if it had been waiting for him to hear it. The sounds are fewer now. A metal mug is rinsed somewhere in the back. Water runs into a trough. Someone laughs once out in the lane and the sound passes by without entering. The workshop keeps its own quieter weather. Under Ismail's palm, cotton no longer feels like something to get through. It feels like cotton, dense, softened by earlier washing, carrying traces of the many returns it has already made through this long process. He prints to the end of one section and Yusuf advances the cloth again. Straight, Ismail says. Yusuf adjusts it by the width of a nail. Straight. The star block lands, lifts, lands again. There is pleasure in the accuracy, though he would not call it that while working. more like relief from the need to think in words. The carved teak meets the existing grid. His fingers settle into their old holds. He notices the worn edge where one corner has rounded slightly over years of contact. He knows how to compensate without naming the adjustment to himself. The last visible stretch of cloth comes toward him, and the repeated star flowers extend across it as evening turns from blue-gold to a deeper blue. By now the tally in his head has thinned. He is not measuring the remaining work in the same anxious way. There is still a remaining section, certainly. There is still the practical handling after printing, but the difference between many and few has lost some of its pressure. The cloth asks for the next true placement, then the next one after that. Nothing else helps it. He reaches the final span on the table. Yusuf lifts the far end slightly so the fresh areas do not drag. Ismail works the last row carefully, his wrist steady, elbow floating just above the surface. The workshop light has changed enough that the printed forms seem to rise from the cloth more than sit on it. Existing indigo deepens. The pale reserves look cooler, almost silver in the fading light. Thump. Lift. Thump. Lift. One star flower more, then another. The last impression of the stage comes down no differently from the first. That matters to him. No flourish, no rushing to be done, just wood, pressure, release. When he lifts the block, the pattern closes its run across the visible end of the cloth and lies there quietly complete for this evening. He does not move at once. He lets his hands stay where they are, one on the block, one resting near the border. The cloth gives back no praise, it simply holds what has been placed into it. Then he checks the line from one end of the table to the other. The motifs sit true. A few places catch his eye because of the changing light, but when he leans closer the concern dissolves. Good. Clean enough. Honest. He wipes the carved face with the damp rag, careful in the grooves, and sets the block aside. Its underside leaves a dark circle of moisture on the work plank beside the table. Yusuf loosens the cloth from the padded surface where it clings faintly. Together, without ceremony, they begin to lift. Handling is its own stage. Freshly printed work can be spoiled by impatience more quickly than by weather. Ismail slides both forearms under the length and raises it in a wide, shallow fold. Yusuf takes the advancing portion and keeps it from brushing the table edge. The cotton has weight now from what it carries, though not much, enough to remind the body that cloth is never only a surface. It is absorbent, shifting, responsive. It remembers touch. They carry it toward the dye area, where the stone floor is darker from water and cooler underfoot. The room opens a little there. Trays give way to basins, a trough, a vat with its own dim sheen. The air smells more strongly of wet fabric and minerals. Parveen is already at the basin, sleeves pushed up, the heel of one hand resting on the basin's rim, in the unhurried way she has when waiting near water. She glances once at the cloth and clears a space for its arrival. "This one," Ismail says. She nods. "Bring it here." Nothing about the movement is hurried. This length has already known mordants, resists, rinses, natural dyes, sun, shadow, and the waiting between them. Tonight is one more return. What has just been printed must now meet water and indigo again in the measured way this stage requires. They lower the cloth carefully. Parveen guides one end. Ismail feeds the length forward. The dyed liquid receives the cotton with a quiet darkening. For a moment the fabric looks almost wrong, flatter and heavier, as wet cloth often does. Then it shifts under the surface, and the pattern hidden within the layers of process seems to gather itself. Indigo is never finished at the instant of contact. Air has work to do after water. So does time. He watches more than he touches now. Parveen draws the cloth through at the same unhurried pace she always keeps near water, her hands sure at the selvage. Yusuf keeps the next fold from twisting. Water laps softly against stone. Drops fall back from the lifted edge in a slow count. The evening light has almost left the room, and what remains catches on the wet surface in narrow bands. Ismail resists the old habit of directing every inch. He knows this part too well to interfere for the comfort of feeling in charge. The vat has its terms. The dye has its terms. Natural dyes ask for attention but do not reward fussing. They darken, open, and settle according to contact, temperature, air, the memory of earlier stages, the patience of the people standing nearby. As the cloth emerges, the indigo looks greenish for a breath, then begins already to deepen. Water threads off the hem. One drip strikes the floor. Then another. Parveen lifts and shifts. Yusuf gathers the wet length with both hands and gives Ismail room to take the weight farther down. The fabric feels entirely different now. At the table it answered pressure. Here it answers support. Its coolness is honest and complete. The printed stars are not louder for this stage, only more embedded in the whole surface. What the hand placed earlier is now meeting what liquid and air will continue. Someone in the next room stacks blocks with a low clack of wood. The sound comes and goes. Evening has crossed into early night. No one says so. It is visible in the workshop's dim edges and in the way all movement has become slightly more deliberate. When the cloth has had its measured encounter with dye and water, they carry it to the hanging line at the courtyard edge where air can move. The line is already marked by use, faintly blue in places from other evenings. Ismail and Yusuf lift together, and Parveen spreads the weight so it hangs without folding over itself. The wet fabric lengthens under gravity. Droplets gather, brighten briefly, then fall to the stone below. There is always a moment after hanging when the cloth seems only to drip. Then, slowly, it begins to be a surface again. The indigo settles darker. The earlier red and black wait inside the pattern. Reserved spaces hold their pale quiet. The whole length, which on the table felt like a sequence of tasks, now reads as one continuous field, not stage after stage after stage, but a single surface that has passed through repeated meetings, through cotton and water and carved wood, through resist and wash, and indigo and hands that know how not to grip too hard. Ismail steps back. Nothing more can be improved by staring at it too hard. The air will do what it does. Night will cool it. The cloth will rest between stages, not complete, not abandoned either, simply where it belongs for now. He returns to the table for the star block. Cleaning it is small work, but not an afterthought. He rinses the carved face with careful fingers, loosening what remains in the grooves, then wipes it dry with the rag, until the edges of the motif show clearly again. The teak is darkened almost to the color of old tea, where years of indigo have touched it. Its corners are softened. Along one side, the wood holds a faint sheen from his thumb. Around him, the workshop finishes itself for the evening. A basin is emptied. Cloths are folded. One lamp comes on near the doorway. Not bright, just enough. No one fills the quiet to prove ease with it. Yusuf coils a length of rope. Parveen washes her hands, the water running briefly blue, then nearly clear. When Ismail looks again at the hanging cloth, he sees less of a checklist than he did an hour ago. He sets the clean block in its place with the others, handle down, carved face hidden. Then he walks to the open edge of the workshop and pauses there with nothing in his hands. Beyond the courtyard wall, the sky has deepened to the kind of blue that holds its color for a while before black. One star is visible already, then another if he waits and lets his eyes adjust. They do not arrive all at once. They appear in the same patient way the printed field came into being on the table, one form after another, separated by small distances, belonging to a larger order without needing to announce it. Behind him, the cloth hangs damp and darkening. The star-flower block has left its measured run across the length. Indigo goes on changing in the air. Water still finds its last way to the ground. Nothing calls to be finished tonight beyond what already has been. He stands there a little longer than needed. The habit of tallying has loosened without his having to argue with it. The workshop is quieter. The cloth is where it should be. The sky above Kutch holds its first sparse pattern. Breath enters, leaves. He looks once more at the line where the cloth rests between labor and night. It seems almost to continue into the darkness beyond the courtyard, as if pattern and sky are made patient by the same interval. Not the same thing, only neighboring rhythms. Then there is only the evening air, the damp cotton, the last occasional drip on stone, and the first stars steady over the workshop while the Ajrakh cloth remains with the night, still becoming what it is not yet done becoming. Thank you for spending this time with the Night Sky Reader. May your night be peaceful. Until next time, rest well.